Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on partnering to advance patient safety, the role of medical technologies. This session will look into the different stakeholders' perspectives on technology-associated risks and how to improve safety of medical devices and prevent diagnostic and medication errors. I have the pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning. She is the Executive Director of Health First Europe. Since 2013, she has been working on EU issues regarding health and safety and ICTs. She has experience in managing European associations, planning and implemented tailor-made events and outreach campaigns. She holds a master's degree in European and international law and an executive master in communications and EU politics from Brussels. Friends, I have the pleasure to welcome Ms. Melina Rasso, Executive Director, Health First Europe. Over to you, Melina.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your nice introduction. Then, first of all, I would like to start really thanking the organizer for inviting Health First Europe to join this section, and especially to invite us to join not just the Global Patient Congress in the middle of a global pandemic situation that is already a great challenge, but also to give us the opportunity to really moderate this session about partnering to advance patient safety during the Patient Safety Day. As you may know, Health First Europe in the last almost 20 years has always advocated for a multi-stakeholder engagement when we speak on patient safety, because we truly believe that only involving all the health stakeholders we can advance patient safety, not just for the benefit of the single patient, but for the benefit of the whole society. Then, when we speak about patient safety this morning, I was listening to Jeremy Hunt. He says something that really touched me. Patient safety needs to be about practical changes. And when we speak about practical changes, only together we can implement these kind of changes. And of course, a key role is played by technology. We cannot ignore this fact. Patients need new technology, they need innovation. Innovation has all the skills, has all the capacity to really improve the quality of life and quality of care. But of course, there are risks connected to the technology. There are risks connected basically to everything in our life. But the idea of really patient safety is try to minimize this risk and make sure that we can prevent everything that is possible to prevent in the healthcare sector. Really talking about risks, I would like now to give the floor to the first presentation of the day from Fiona Garin, Senior Director of Strategic Market in Europe at BD, Becton Dickinson. Please, Fiona, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, good morning to everyone. I'm delighted to be here today addressing you on World Patient Safety Day on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Many years ago, my mother contracted a healthcare associated infection whilst undergoing hip replacement surgery in a leading hospital in Spain. That healthcare associated infection, also called HAI, really had an impact on the quality of her life and actually eventually contributed to her death. At the time, despite me working for a few years then on healthcare, I recognized that I actually had very little, I think, awareness around the risks that my mother was actually undergoing when she had actually entered that hospital for that surgery. What I'm most surprised about is that many years have actually gone by, and I think the level of risk has actually not been reduced. So the burden of disease attributed to HAIs, as well as many other elements under patient safety, continues to be very high. And that the level of awareness actually of the general public around these topics also remains quite low. So during this session and during the next, I think, approximately 15, 18 minutes, I'm going to really try and share with you some of the lessons, some of the challenges that we have actually started working on as a company, BD. BD, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're a leading medical technology company, actually present in most countries of the world, and we're actually present all the way from research to diagnosis to cure. So we are very present in most stages of a typical patient's journey. I'd really like to also drive that sense of urgency and also hopefully by the end of my session have convinced you that patient safety not only flows through us as a company, but flows through each and every one of us that is actually attending this Congress. So I'd like to kick it off again, relating back to the topic of risk. And I think like everything in life, many times people are just not aware of where risks actually lie. So I'm going to ask you a very plain question, and I'd like you to reflect upon it for approximately 10 seconds. If I actually asked you, what is the most deadliest animal in the world? And start thinking about what your children would say, what your colleagues, what your family, what is the most deadliest animal in the world? You can actually post some of your answers if you want on the chat box. I potentially won't see it, but I'll actually rely on Melina to actually tell me what some of your answers are.
I'm thinking about mine.
Okay, so why don't you kick it off, Melina?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I know that is quite irrational, but for me are spiders.
Okay.
Spiders for me as the most risky thing that could really hurt my life.
I think what my children would say is crocodiles.
What about you, Karen? Any thoughts from your side?
A snake.
Okay. So anyway, you covered, and I'm sure many of you have probably thought of the typical animals such as lions, snakes, sharks, hippopotamus. Yet, actually, the most deadliest animal in the world is the mosquito, significantly deadlier than any other animal that I just mentioned. Similarly, if I had asked you the question, what do you think is most dangerous? To board a plane, to go bungee jumping, or to enter a hospital? I am pretty sure that, again, many of you will probably have thought it's actually much, much riskier to either board a plane or to go bungee jumping. When in fact, if I take the case of the plane, it is actually from 100 to 1,000 times more dangerous to enter a hospital than actually to board a plane. So this actually does kind of go back to the example I gave with my mother, where I personally was not at all aware of the risks that we were actually undergoing. But again, these risks are nothing new. So patient safety is nothing new. So healthcare practitioners really do take very seriously the principle of do no harm. And it is at their core, it is their utmost priority to really protect patients. So why, you know, with that in mind, why is patient safety such a big issue still in healthcare systems across the world? I'll be fundamentally now focusing on Europe, which is where we have actually developed what we call a patient safety program. And I will be fundamentally talking about 4 major areas under patient safety. One is healthcare associated infections. The other one, and of course, AMR associated with that. So you definitely heard Dame Sally Davis talking about that just a short time ago. Sepsis, which you will also be hearing about a little more in a bit, and medication errors. So we launched a program again just a few years ago, and the first thing we did is to try and determine what are the underpinning challenges that are preventing healthcare practitioners and healthcare systems to make those practical changes and move the needle. And what we found is that across the 5 major countries where we conducted this research, challenges were actually pretty much the same. They got manifested maybe differently, but they were pretty much the same. A huge challenge is that of staff shortages and turnover. So to give you an example, you're 30% more likely to actually have an adverse event or an error happen to you in a hospital during, let's say, night shifts or during vacation periods. The other one is around limited collaboration across departments. So having much more of a holistic view where people do understand the impact that their silo is having on the rest of the patient journey. Variation in practice, so lack of standardization, the complexity of actually implementing safety measures, even if people actually want to do it. The fact that they're limited and strained resources, many times financially, the insufficient training and education, the lack of awareness. So it was not only me that lacked that awareness, but in many instances, healthcare professionals have been in their job for many, many years and have been practicing the same way and are not necessarily aware of some of the potential risks they're incurring. And last but not least, the obsolete technology and equipment. Underpinning all of these challenges is actually one of the culture of safety. And here I think it's very critical that we look at the culture of safety very holistically. All of us play a huge role. All stakeholders that are connected directly or indirectly with healthcare play a role in developing that culture. Jeremy Hunt mentioned the blame culture, but I'd really like to actually start off with the fact that in many cases, healthcare practitioners think errors or adverse events are actually inevitable. They're a part of everyday life. Whereas what we know from, again, evidence is that more than 50% of those are actually preventable and are due to human errors. Very, very similarly, and I'll go back to the blame culture, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. So a lot of the culture pre-existing in institutions does not allow for that learning that Jeremy Hunt alluded to, or that fair culture, or that just culture. The way actually interventions and different practices have been introduced into healthcare systems has been much more from a piecemeal and fragmented way and very reactively, so not proactively. And finally, safety for the most part has really been based on the heroism of clinicians versus healthcare systems really looking at the design of safe systems, processes, and conditions that will enable those healthcare practitioners to make safer choices. Addressing patient safety, therefore, and again, I think this is a common theme across today, is a shared responsibility. There are many stakeholders without which patient safety will never become a reality. I'd really like to zoom into 3 major stakeholders: healthcare practitioners, patients, and healthcare institutions. And I'd really like to start off with patients. And I think the role of patients in advancing patient safety many times is actually underestimated. You take ownership of your own health. You share information with others, or should I say, we take ownership of our own health and we share information with others, because all of us can and will be a patient at one stage. And I'll give you one example where by empowering patients, there's already been an automatic impact on sepsis in the UK, where they launched a campaign, Could This Be Sepsis? And basically they informed and educated patients around the symptoms. So every time patients then in that cohort started getting symptoms and called an ambulance or were in an institution, asked the question, could this be sepsis? This has had a major impact on both morbidity and mortality in sepsis in the UK. Similarly, I would say that healthcare institutions really are trying to maximize the quality and outcomes, again, whilst driving sustainability. And healthcare practitioners are trying to maximize clinical outcomes whilst at the same time protecting patients. Or should I say, they always try and protect patients and then really try and maximize clinical outcomes. If I now move into, I guess, the core of this session, which is really about the medical technology industry and BD, and I can really speak for us as a company, obviously. We are actually, as I said before, present in multiple stages of a patient journey. So our technologies and our capabilities are intrinsically linked to the successful implementation of patient safety action plans. So what we're trying to do is really partner with healthcare institutions, with healthcare systems, with clinicians, with policymakers, so that we can actually drive better outcomes, so that our technologies, our innovation can be really linked to the unmet needs for patients in the system. And we're focusing majoritarily on 3 major buckets. And those 3 major buckets, again, are aimed to address the challenges I mentioned before. The first one is around maximizing, helping clinicians to maximize their performance and their efficiency. Again, understanding there's shortages, there's burnout, there's turnaround, etc. We're also helping to advance and enhance diagnostic accuracy and timeliness. And this has never been more, I think, visible as in the context of COVID, where I think now most people are very versed on PCRs and diagnostics. And the third area is around optimizing and standardizing workflows, processes, and procedures within the context of a healthcare system. We are the vector between healthcare practitioners and patients, and between the adequate treatment and the cure. Very importantly, we're actually everywhere. Again, it became pretty apparent in the context of COVID how a lot of medical technologies were absolutely fundamental to addressing COVID. So you can potentially think about ventilators, masks, in ICU beds, you can think of pumps, etc. So the way we're actually doing this is, as I mentioned before, is partnering with the different stakeholders in the system. Again, I think there was a mention around the importance of partnering and actually involving all stakeholders. We're trying to support an overarching shift from a piecemeal, let's say, approach to one that looks at the system in a more holistic manner. The way we're doing this is by, in the institutions, supporting leadership to either establish or sustain the culture of safety they have. We're trying to support a common set of metrics that really reflect meaningful outcomes. And I'm really wanting to emphasize the meaningful outcomes, because those meaningful outcomes can help us learn and can help us fine-tune interventions to really have that practical change, again, that was mentioned by Jeremy Hunt. We aim to address safety across the entire patient journey. So again, and this will actually have an impact also on the continuum of care and everything that happens outside of hospitals. We also acknowledge we need to support a culture of healthcare worker safety, which has been at the core of who BD is for many years. And I'm very happy to say, I guess, the theme of this year's World Patient Safety Day is at the core of who we are. And finally, as I mentioned before, we try and develop and help implement safe, innovative, and optimized technology. Again, technology that matters to patient safety. So how do we do this effectively? So we try and automate tasks. So we drive innovation that is automation. So that automation, to give you an example, if you start automating the pharmacy, what you can actually do is, if normally medication would be dispensed manually, you're freeing up time of that nurse. Again, remember the context of staff shortages, of burnout, etc. So you're freeing up that time of the nurse so that she can actually spend more time with a patient and therefore enhance patient safety. We also facilitate peer-to-peer learning and information sharing. So again, as we're present and working with multiple institutions in multiple locations, we can accelerate that peer-to-peer learning, that cultural learning across institutions. We are not only, let's say, implementing technologies on their own. So again, in our own entire development process, we need to really research processes, procedures. So we are in a position to better train clinicians on best practices, on compliance with the latest guidelines. Some of our technologies also help to intercept potential errors through guardrails. We try and also, through automation, reduce the variation in practice and drive standardization. And we also, as I mentioned before, try and improve clinical decision-making and improve clinical performance by touching upon diagnostic accuracy and timeliness. And these are just a few examples of what technology and innovation can actually bring in alignment with patient safety. So our aspiration is really for safety to flow through every person and every system, changing attitudes and improving accountability. I'll give you one example. In many instances, hospitals outsource the cleaning and ancillary staff. If we do not educate that cleaning staff to really disinfect surfaces, we can be introducing the most innovative technology in the world, yet we will never reach the outcomes we want. So that cleaning staff, that ancillary staff, is equally responsible for advancing this, and safety definitely also flows through them. And we as a company, as a medical technology company, also expect to do that by improving our own technologies, our own services, and our own capabilities. So hopefully I persuaded you that safety is something that we all need to take on. We're all responsible for, we're all accountable for. I would actually even claim that we all have a unique responsibility and moral opportunity to actually impact the healthcare systems in which our family, our friends, our colleagues, ourselves will be treated one day. So I'm only going to ask one thing from you. When you finish today's, I'm sure, amazing session at the Congress, think about, how does safety flow through you? Does safety actually flow through you? How can you increase that flow? So thank you very much. And can you please play the video?
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and also for sharing this nice video. Now I'd like to give the floor to Cavaldi. And then Fiona, I have a couple of questions for you, but I will come back to you later on.
Thank you very much, Melina, and thank you, Fiona. I think I really liked your presentation. I think safety flowing through me is something I really appreciate. I just finished a session earlier with the DEEP. This is disease expert patients who were very expert patients on the issue and really knew the subject matter well, and they really came up what you were saying, took control of their health systems, fellow patients, and engaged them to ensure that we have got that patient safety ingrained into us. But what impressed me was that we had to take action, as you said. We have to speak up for that. And I think today, as a World Patient Safety Day, is a very important day in that we are turning it around and we're saying health professional or health worker safety means patient safety. Now, I think they should take a message that we are concerned about them. Likewise, they should be concerned about us as well. So as a patient, as I said, I had experienced this issue that a late diagnosis, and I think diagnostic failure, I would say to some point, led to my condition, the colorectal cancer. And by the time they came to address it, it was very late in the day. They couldn't, if it had been addressed beforehand, I wouldn't have had to get that major surgery or wear a colostomy bag as I do now. But it revealed to me that there were a series of things, and primarily it was me to start off with. I should have noticed that I've got irregular bowel movements. I should have gone to that hospital and doctor and spoken. And then, like you said, is it sepsis? There was a major campaign going on around me. I mean, this is what, as I call it, the 2020 hindsight. It didn't mean nothing to me, and yet it was the entire, after the event, you realize those are my exact symptoms. And I felt so stupid at that why didn't I do it? And then by the time I got to the doctor, I think there was this case of equipment as well. They were looking for colonoscopy time, and that revealed there was time. There was help once I turned up, and there was the health professional who actually operated the equipment safely wasn't there, because it's a very dangerous piece of machine. You're introducing gas and nitrogen and other things to inflate your bowel. You've got to have that expertise. And I think the stigma and also the other things attached to it were missed out. And I think I began to realize that it's really safety begins to flow through me, and it is important. And now as an advocate leading IAPO, I think that's what we're impressing home, that expert patients must be engaged fully in everything. And we thank you for showing us that vector that you said, that's it, that's a clue point, that you are there bringing the standardization we want. We are not relying on variability of human experience. The diagnostic and the health devices standardized cannot vary across the world. I think that will unify us into one system. And early diagnosis, quick diagnosis, appropriate diagnosis. And thank you for that help. And I think I'll really appreciate. And I will now hand over to back to Karen to take over. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Cavaldi, for sharing your experience. I think, if I'm not mistaken, now we should see one short clip, if it's correct.
Let me address the clip before that, Melina. So I will really be very short because I'm mindful of the time we want to keep for the Q&A. So thank you so much. And it is actually Melina's fault, under quotes, if I may say, for what I'm going to present now. And this is actually the BD-IAPO partnership. And when I say her fault, it is really that she has brought us up together in a very nice, herself moderated session at the European Health Forum Gastein, where our messages with Fiona, actually IAPOS and BD messages, resonated so well that we thought, okay, this is something, as Jeremy Hunt said, it is something that we can do to do practicable changes, to change the behavior, to start to influence, to start to involve patients more through this partnership, and not only for the medication errors that is very common practice, but also for the medical technologies. And I really thank Fiona very much for bearing with us, for bringing this partnership together. And this partnership will not only consist of what Jeremy Hunt again said, the talking shop. So there will be elements of that, but also we are currently working with BD to develop patient guidelines, those that will be aligned with the clinical guidelines, to really give the opportunity to the patients to understand, to get aware about their own condition, to be meaningful participants, active participants in the care. So that, as she said, if we can only ask, is this sepsis? We might really save a life. So empowering a patient is something that we will be doing together with BD on this journey, on this long partnership that will only now start with something that is the first step and a very dear step to me, and that is the patient awareness raising campaign called the Voices of Safety. And this Voices of Safety campaign, it's really to bring back to life some of the stories, as we heard in the morning. Instead of asking closure, these are the people that are willing to relive their tragedies so that they don't really happen again and again, and they are prevented and preventable, all of those 50 or more % that Fiona mentioned in her presentation. So we use this opportunity to launch our Voices of Safety campaign, the joint campaign between IAPO, BD, and the Global Sepsis Trust, by showing you the first of the series of clips. And please bear with us and stay with us on social media, on different channels, to see more of those stories. Those stories are really very informative, and they can really be life changers. Please, if we can see the video now. Thank you.
My name's Liz Bennett. I'm currently 67 years old, although I don't quite know where all those years have gone. I currently work for the NHS, and I work as a risk manager, patient safety manager. So I have quite a busy life, really. In November 2016, I developed a urinary tract infection, which wasn't treated properly. The infection got worse, and that developed into sepsis. It has had quite a long-term effect on me. The initial stage was quite dramatic, but then, of course, the recovery period, the post-sepsis stage, was actually quite long drawn out. My life today is very good. I have recovered in the main. I'm still left with a bit of neuropathy in my feet. Interestingly, I was in India end of last year, and when I came back, I developed COVID, although of course at that time we didn't know it was COVID. I'm doing well, really. I'm quite pleased that I've survived 2 encounters with a close death experience. The advice I would give to anybody else, if they feel unwell, or if you have a relative or a friend or a work colleague that feels unwell, don't dismiss it. It could very well be sepsis. Sepsis is a medical emergency, and it should be treated as such. If anybody ever says, I feel as if I'm going to die, don't ignore it, because the fact is they probably are.
Safety flows through me. BD. Advancing the world of health.
Thank you so much. Please, Neda.
Please, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, no, really, thank you so much also for sharing this video. I'm really looking forward to see all the other clips, because there are more. And definitely, as Health First Europe, we will be happy to support and sharing this really interesting campaign. Now, I have a couple of questions for our speakers. While I see also if there is any question coming from the audience, feel free to share them. Then Neda can help me to collect the questions. One of the first question is, Fiona, you were mentioning that there are 3 key players: healthcare professionals, industry, and patient. And what about the policymaker? From your perspective, what's the role of policymaker in advancing patient safety? You're on mute, Fiona.
Fiona?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Apologies. I only mentioned those 3 for the sake of time, but if you actually go back to the slide, you will actually see that we had healthcare practitioners, and then we had healthcare systems. When I talk about healthcare systems, and I talked about maximizing outcomes whilst driving sustainability, I am talking about policymakers. And I think especially, and again, I can only speak for Europe, which is the region I'm most familiar with, 70% plus of healthcare is actually public. So there is the linkage and the intersection between policy, strategy, nationally in a country and what gets executed in institutions is very close. So it's very different if you're talking about private healthcare systems, potentially like the US. So obviously policymakers play a huge role in prioritizing this as a key topic in actually driving the sustainability goals for the country. And I can tell you innovation will be one of the few elements that is clearly going to help drive that sustainability. And then not only that, but they will actually have to align finances in order for that to also be prioritized, so that things can be actually viewed much more holistically as opposed to in a piecemeal way in the different departments. If you only allocate a budget, let's say to the laboratory, that does not enable you to drive best practices, because of course in the lab, if the clinician is actually getting the results, let's say faster, but there is no protocol or process that enables that clinician to get it faster and really implement a change, then of course it doesn't matter if you're investing in one place and the benefits are in another, the likelihood of that investment taking place is very limited. So I would say policymakers, again, just to summarize, not only play a huge role in, of course, strategy, policy, and guidelines, but very important, I think, from a financial standpoint, making sure that that gets translated into practical changes and operationalization in the field.
Milena, can I add on to that and say that
yes, please.
Policymakers actually are watching us patients and health workers, I think. And they are looking for us to legitimize this through our mass movements and engagement. I think once they see that patients are fed up with the level of patient harm we are encountering in our health systems, and the health professionals have been suffering as well, as you saw. Suddenly when we all turned up every Friday night or Thursday night, whatever it was, clapping for health professionals, they were flying planes all over the world to get PPE. That shows how policymakers change their viewpoints. We have the power, and I'm so glad Fiona brought it. That's when I saw safety flow through me, because my hands were actually reaching the sounds of these politicians. That it was that old adage when the British NHS was formed, the minister had said that I want to be in a position where if someone drops a pan or something in one hospital in remote Wales, the minister should hear it. Meaning that's how we should be making this noise, get to the center. And thank you, everybody. I think I like this safety flows through me idea, and I think I'll adopt it as my personal motto. It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have one question coming from the audience. Basically, for both our speakers, what is your message to healthcare management globally on how to implement the recommended patient safety protocols and measures? Because we know that currently we have also this issue that we have protocols, we have measures, we have guidelines, but still there is a strong lack of implementation. Then if you could send a message to the healthcare management, what will be that message?
So I think I could summarize it. I mean, I've spoken about many of the elements. I think having that culture of safety, I think it's very important to be open to private-public collaboration. I think it's never become, again, more important, and it became very visible during COVID. Again, without the medical technology industry providing the necessary equipment, governments, policymakers, healthcare management would have never been able to address the pandemic. So I think similarly, they should actually be open to that. They should be open to piloting partnerships. I think in many instances, no one has the answer. And in many instances, in order to build that evidence, you really need to try new things. Again, as I said before, patient safety is not something new. So I think to be open to that and be open to piloting. So you don't need to have 100% evidence. You don't need to actually have all the answers, but to be bold. If you're really serious about addressing this, to be bold and to involve all of the stakeholders, including actually patients. So I am a firm advocate of patients. I mean, similarly to Kawaldeep, I spoke about my mother's HAI, but I am actually an oncology patient, and I see that every single day. So I think if we can also, if they can do a better job of educating and empowering patients, I actually think many of these protocols and guidelines would be implemented because patients would actually be calling this out. And I'll give you just a very quick example. One of my close friends, her daughter was undergoing a brain surgery. I gave her 5 tips on patient safety. One of them, which was around medication errors. And she intercepted an error just by being there and asking 3 questions around the dose that her daughter was actually going to be given. So I think empowering those patients will also be a critical element in actually driving that implementation.
Thank you so much. And from your side, Cavaldi, you have 1 minute to reply to this question.
I think I'll agree with Fiona on this, that it's a partnership. You and I and the health system work together. There shouldn't be no artificial ring fence between us and them. Where I am now, today in a bed, tomorrow you will be. That's my message to health system. If you're a politician, where I sit now, you'll be there next. So let's listen to the bell. It tolls for us. It is not tolling for somebody else. So let's work together. And COVID has shown us that we have to work together. There is a changed world. We cannot work in health system silos that we have been doing, that the left doesn't know the right, and treating ancillary workers less than the surgeons. I'm sorry. As Fiona started, the smallest, the most dangerous animal is a mosquito, but I think we have been proved otherwise that it was a COVID virus, if you can call it an animal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Ned or Karen like to add something. I can give you a few seconds and then I will move forward with the closing remarks because I think we are like really quickly running out of time. Is it correct? Yes. We have 3 minutes left. Karen.
Yeah, so I'm so happy to sit in this session because I come from a part of the world where the asymmetry of information is really huge for patients, and too often patients are very much disempowered. But it's good that we're starting this movement and we're also shifting some of the responsibility to the patients. And I truly love the call that safety flows through me because it gives us the power also. And learning that just asking the right questions give you some of that power. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed this session.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melina. Really, really, just one sentence. I believe that this session was so empowering and actually sent the right message around the key theme of the Congress, which is co-creation in innovative healthcare. So thank you very much for bringing these messages and for making a takeaways for all the participants.
Thank you so much. I would like to close this section, just remind ourselves the WHO development goals, especially about health. When we say that health is not a cost, is an investment, is not a reward for development, but is a prerequisite. Health is a pathway to security, prosperity, and peace. And on this line, I will like to thank all the speakers for your contribution, for making this section just amazing. And I hope to have the opportunity to talk with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. And could the audience now join us in the next sessions? You leave here, go back to the auditorium, and we will be in the second session, very important session again as well. Let's see you across the divide there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.